How far would you go to avenge your child's killer? A lot of parents would say they would kill for their kids. But is this just a figure of speech or an honest truth? Well, in 1981, a German mother named Marianne Bachmeier actually went through with this when she shot and killed her daughter's killer at his very own murder trial. She had snuck a .22 caliber pistol inside of her purse, and when she was just stood feet away from her daughter's killer, she pulled out her gun and fired 8 shots, killing him instantly. Today we're going to be talking about the brutal murder of Anna Bachmeier and her mother Marianne Bachmeier. This series is made for educational purposes. Viewer discretion is advised. Marianne Bachmeier was born on June 3rd, 1950 in Starstedt in West Germany, after her parents had fled after the end of the Second World War. Her father had been involved in the Waffen SS, which were a very awful group of people who were heavily involved in the Holocaust, causing mass shootings and providing guards for Nazi concentration camps, along with a lot of other awful things. So overall, he was a disgusting human being. Growing up, Marianne was raised in a very religious and strict household. It's said that her father was an abusive drunk, which was very typical of the times. He would spend most of his time at the bar, and when he would come home, he would be abusive to both Marianne and her mother. Fortunately for them, Marianne's parents ended up getting a divorce, and she would be raised by her mother from now on. But as Marianne got older into her teenage years, her and her mother began having disagreements and their relationship became strained. It's said that her mother would often blame Marianne for problems within the family, and at this point she was only a child, so she really wouldn't have been responsible for anything. So to me it looks like Marianne was treated not the best by her mother, and this became even more apparent when her mother remarried. Her new stepfather was described by Marianne herself as domineering, dictatorial and abusive. He made it very clear that he was in control of the house. Everything he said goes. And I bet it was hard for Marianne moving from one household with an abusive father to another one. But one thing about Marianne is she was a very fiery person, and she wouldn't let anyone push her around. As mentioned earlier, her relationship with her mother was strained, and at only 15 years old, she was kicked out of the house and left to fend for herself. This forced Marianne to grow up and mature very quickly. She no longer had the support of her family, and only a year after being kicked out of the house, at the age of 16, Marianne fell pregnant. She was very well aware that she was in no position to take care of the baby, so shortly after giving birth, she put the baby up for adoption. Now I can imagine this was very difficult for her as well, but I personally think it was the right decision. I mean, she was only 17 years old herself, she was still a child. Shortly after giving up her baby, when she was about 17 or 18, she began a relationship with another guy and she fell pregnant again. This time she was adamant on keeping her baby. I mean, her whole life was completely different this time around. She had a stable relationship and a more secure housing situation. However, unfortunately, shortly before giving birth to her baby, Marianne was raped at gunpoint by a man who is not named publicly. As Marianne had been kicked out of the house, she was left homeless. So she found herself squatting, and one day a neighbour had spotted her and began watching her like an absolute creep. A few days later, this neighbour broke into the house she was staying in and raped Marianne at gunpoint. As he was leaving, he turned to her and threatened her, saying, quote, "If you call the police, I'll kill you." But fortunately, Marianne chose to ignore his threats and did call the police. This man was arrested and a trial was set, and unbelievably, this man tried to justify his actions by saying that Marianne was a whore and that she was asking for it, which is just disgusting, and the courts fortunately took no notice of that statement, and he was sentenced to prison. Now, the sentence he was given is pretty unclear, so during my research I looked up the average time for a rape conviction in Germany at the time, and it said it was about 2 years. So I can guess it was around 2 years, but hopefully it was a lot more. I mean, 2 years for rape at gunpoint is insane. Understandably, all this put Marianne in a very bad mental state. So again, she ended up putting this baby up for adoption. And to make things even harder for her, at around this time, her relationship with her boyfriend ended. In 1972, so when Marianne was just 22 years old, she began a new job working in a bar named Tupasa. And she began a new relationship with her manager named Christian. Now, I'm not too sure whether this relationship was a serious one or something a bit more casual, but Marianne ended up falling pregnant for a third time. And once again, she decided that she was definitely going to keep this baby. And when she told Christian that she was going to keep the baby, he made it very apparent that he had no intention of helping to raise this baby. And Marianne was more than happy to raise this baby alone. And on the 14th of November 1972, she gave birth to her baby, a daughter. And she decided to name her daughter Anna. Now, I'm not going to sit here and call Marianne a bad mother. However, she definitely did not have the time or stable lifestyle to properly take care of a child. As she worked in a bar, she would work long hours late into the night and was said to never be in a rush to go home after her shifts. She would always stay that extra time longer. And working these hours, she would sleep all through the day and work all through the night. And she would often bring Anna along with her. Now, I don't need to tell you this, but a bar is not the right environment for a baby or a child. In a similar way to Marianne's childhood, Anna was forced to grow up quickly and be very independent. Anna would often sleep behind the bar while her mother was working and partying, and Marianne was very aware that her lifestyle was not the best for a child, as she often debated putting Anna up for adoption. On the morning of the 5th of May 1980, 7-year-old Anna Bachmeier was getting ready for school when her and her mother, Marianne, began arguing. In a sort of rebellious way, in the heat of the moment, she left the house and decided to skip school that day. Unfortunately, after leaving that morning, Anna Bachmeier would never be seen alive again. A neighbour by the name of Klaus Grabowski had seen Anna outside, had kidnapped her, and then held her in his house. There, inside of this house, he sexually assaulted Anna for hours before strangling her to death with a pair of his fiancée's tights. After killing Anna, he put her body into a box and then left it on the shores of a canal and then returned home. After returning home, his fiancée had called the police on him after she had become suspicious that Klaus was responsible for the disappearance of Anna. When police arrived, he was arrested and taken into custody, where he began confessing to the murder of 7-year-old Anna Bachmeier. Oh yes, he confessed to the murder of Anna, but he fully denied sexually abusing her. Instead, he gave a very different, twisted version of events. He said that Anna had come over to his house and tried to seduce him, and when he said no, she blackmailed him into giving her money, and that's when he killed her. Which is completely ridiculous. In all the time of researching true crime, I've never heard, a more unbelievable story. And this is made even more unbelievable by Klaus Grabowski's unsavoury past. He had previous convictions for sexually assaulting 2 young girls. Now, instead of being sent to prison, Klaus Grabowski voluntarily signed up for chemical castration, which I found out in my research was a common thing for sex offenders in Germany at that time, which I think is crazy. Put them in jail. Yes, it's a good idea in theory, but in practice, not so much. seeing what he goes on to do. Anyways, to explain a bit more about chemical castration, it's a drug given to the offender which reduces their sex drive, any sexual fantasies and sexual arousal, in hopes that it will stop the person from reoffending. This procedure is not permanent and can be reversed. And without permission or knowledge from the authorities, Klaus Grabowski went and reversed his chemical castration, which is done by hormone therapy. In March of 1981, the trial for Anna's murder began, and Klaus's defence team argued that he had a hormone imbalance from reversing his chemical castration, which was kind of their only argument, and it kind of shoots him in the foot, seeing that the reversal was done illegally without the authorities' permission. And this argument wasn't very strong anyway, because he had committed violent sexual crimes before any of these castrations or hormone replacement therapies, so nice try, mate. I can't even begin to imagine how Marianne would have been feeling, knowing that a sexual predator had been let out with no repercussions and had just been living nearby, and then he just goes on to murder her daughter. On the third day of the trial, Marianne was getting ready for the day, but before she set off to the courthouse, she had one thing she needed to bring with her: a .22 caliber semi-automatic pistol, which she put inside of her purse. She arrived at the courthouse as normal and made her way inside the courtroom. Now, shortly before she arrived, 35-year-old Klaus Grabowski had been escorted by officers into the courtroom and put at his table. Then Marianne arrived, walking quite close up to Klaus, and kind of hovers a few meters away. People have said that they saw her kind of messing around with something in her pockets. Then all of a sudden, she pulls out this .22 caliber gun and fires 8 shots at Klaus Grabowski's back, with only 2 bullets missing, meaning that she had shot him 6 times in the back, and of course there was no way Klaus was going to survive that, and he died almost instantly. People in the courtroom were gasping in shock as to what had just transpired. She had successfully murdered his daughter's killer, and it said that she was heard saying, quote, "This is for you, Anna," which is just heartbreaking. Immediately after being shot, Klaus's body slumped forward onto the desk and slowly slid down onto the courtroom floor. Back to Marianne, though. She had dropped her gun, showing she was not a danger to anybody else. It was pretty clear what her intentions were for that day. Marianne was arrested calmly and was taken into custody. And when she was questioned by police, she told them that she had gotten the gun from someone at Tu Pasa, the bar that she worked at, but I don't believe she snitched on who it was. And she had been storing this gun for quite a while before she went on to use it, and she was actually storing it at Anna's grave, which... okay. Now, she insisted that she didn't get a gun intending to go and murder Klaus Grabowski, but for self-defense purposes. She said that her daughter going missing and being murdered, that had made her feel very unsafe in her community, and in her mind, getting a gun would help put her mind at ease. And she said that she only came up with the idea of killing Klaus Grabowski at his murder trial. And seeing him trying to get his way out of the charges made her very uncomfortable and angry, and she felt that the justice system wasn't going to give him a harsh enough punishment, so she decided to take justice into her own hands. Now, the police didn't 100% believe her when she said it was a very spur-of-the-moment decision. They believed it was a lot more premeditated than she was making it out to be. Obviously, there would have been a small amount of premeditation involved, seeing she would have had to go and get the gun from Anna's grave and then bring it to the courthouse. Now, it's unclear as to whether she had the gun for the previous 2 days of the trial and just hadn't used it. If that was the case, it would have been a more spur-of-the-moment idea, because if she happened to have the gun on her at all times, and if only on that 3rd day she decided to use it, you get what I'm trying to say? After she was arrested, a doctor was brought in to analyse her to see her mental state at the time. The doctor gave Marianne a blank piece of paper and a pen and told her to write anything that came to mind, and apparently that would have been very telling of her mindset. And when Marianne gave the doctor this piece of paper, it said, quote, "I did it for you, Anna, with 7 hearts drawn by it, 7 for each year of her daughter's life." I couldn't find any conclusions to do with her mental state at the time, so I'm guessing that just means nothing was found. Because if they found some at our shop, I'm sure that would come up in sources, but... When this case hit the news, Marianne was front and centre, and she was very well liked by the rest of Germany. They really sympathised with her, they understood why she did what she did, and I feel like a lot of parents would want to do what Marianne had done if their kid had been senselessly murdered. As she had killed somebody though, she was being held in police custody, and as she was being held, Marianne's mental health was really suffering. It was found that she was at a very high risk for suicide. Because of this, her doctor was trying to have her released on medical grounds. Please ignore the screaming children outside. I know it's very annoying. Prosecution in this case were having a very hard time because they had to treat her like any other offender. However, everyone in Germany loved and supported her. But at the end of the day, she did commit murder. Now, lots of people wanted the court to go easy on her and give her a light sentence. However, they were worried that this would send out a bad message. They didn't want people thinking it was okay to just become vigilante killers and take the justice system into their own hands. At her trial, her defence argued that she was so mentally affected by what Klaus had done to her daughter that it wasn't her fault. However, the prosecution argued that she very well knew what she was doing. After killing Klaus Grabowski, Marianne was heard saying some interesting comments. The judge himself had heard her saying, quote, "I wanted to shoot him in the face, but I only got him in the back. I hope he's dead." And 2 other police officers had heard her say, quote, "Unfortunately, I only got the pig from behind." And the prosecution used this to argue premeditation, saying like, she wanted to shoot him in the face, so she clearly thought about killing him before. Which isn't really a strong argument, to be honest. And due to this, the murder charges against her were dropped. However, she was still convicted of manslaughter and was sentenced to 6 years in prison, which she only ended up serving half of. And by the time she was released, the public perception and opinion of her had really changed. Initially, everybody was very supportive of her, but as the media began to dig into her past, this kind of caused a shift. They found out about her 2 previous children, which she had given up for adoption, and they didn't like this at all. Which I personally don't understand. They were condemning her for being selfless, giving up her babies so that they could have a better life than what she could provide, and I found that very odd. And that was a slight element as to why her public image had changed, but I think that the main reason for it was to do with her connections, or rather her father's connections to the Nazis. At this point, post-war Germany was trying to move away from the evil Nazi past, and when they heard that their nation's sweetheart's father was a Nazi, well, this didn't make her look good at all. After Marianne was released from prison at the age of 35, she successfully moved on from this awful chapter of her life. She met a new man and got married. They moved to Nigeria because her new husband was a German teacher and he went over there to teach German. Following this, they actually unfortunately ended up splitting up, and Marianne moved to Sicily alone, where she became a carer at a hospice. At the age of 46, Marianne received the devastating news that she had pancreatic cancer and that she had a very short time left to live. After finding out this news, she moved back to Germany, the very place she had tried so desperately to escape. but had always planned to go back there when she passed to be reunited with her daughter. September 17th, 1996, Marianne Bachmeier died and was buried next to her daughter Anna. And to the very end, Marianne never regretted her actions. She believed she had done the right thing by her daughter. Now, I'd love to hear from any parents watching down below. If you were in her position, would you do the same? Or would you let the justice system take its course? But honestly, Klaus Grabowski's fate seems justice enough to me. Now, was Marianne the perfect woman? No. Did she have her problems? Yes. But that doesn't change the fact that she loved her daughter and couldn't stand to see her reputation be tarnished by a sick predator. In her eyes and the eyes of many others, me included, she did the right thing. Obviously, I'm not condoning murder, don't go killing people. Let the justice system take its path, but I get it. I'd love to hear your thoughts down below. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you very soon with a brand new one. Okay. Bye!